We are about set to go racing here at Barber Motorsports Park with a pair of rookies, Carter in that Soul Red Mazda and Gresham Wagner in the red, white, and black Mx-5 as they're lined up 2 by 2. These 28 drivers set to go racing here, Mark, at Barber Motorsports Park.
One of the coolest features of this facility is the fans that have wound themselves around the trees, in and amongst the trees across the way down that back straightaway, and they are keeping their eye on this field as they will make their way up past the museum to them. Green flag is out, and it looks like Carter's going to get the jump on the field. He is all by his lonesome at first place. The car wiggles just a little bit as he sets up for turn number 1. They go about 4 wide behind him, but Carter's able to hold on to that spot as they work their way through the Alabama roller coaster.
Yep, Wagner put 2 tires into the dirt as Celine Roland streaks to the outside. He's looking for that second position as they fan out. It is a tremendous jump for Michael Carter as he clears the entire field by 5 or 6 car lengths. Battle for second is still on. Celine Roland, though, has the inside preferred line through that turns 5 and 6 portions of the racetrack. Looks like Roland's going to move into the second spot.
And now that Roland has stepped away from that battle from third place on back, he's starting to draw a bead on the youngster. Again, they'll start to set up for that long back straightaway now, and they'll clear the pedestrian crossover, and the field starts to sort itself out a little bit, Nick. We saw at COTA bunches of cars get together, which allowed those front runners to step out a little bit. Seeing a lot more single file racing early on.
Well, they just went through a part of the racetrack, that downhill turns 8 and 9 section where you almost have to go single file. We still saw quite a few drivers go side by side, as you see a couple drivers mid-pack laying some tires into the dirt and kicking up some sand. But this is the part of the racetrack where you have to get single file, do a little drafting in these MX-5 cars. But so far, Mark, during this first lap, pretty good start. We see Robert Stout making a look to the inside as he's trying to get around a car and move up a spot in the top 5. He will slip around that 74 machine of Tyler Maxson, one of the rookie drivers. Maxson, though, not going away, so he's got the inside line out of turn 17.
I spent a long time talking to him back in the paddock before this race today, talking about that 14-year-old Tyler Maxson. What an impressive young man he is. And we talked a little bit about the academic requirements that a 14-year-old faces. And now with this computer age, Nick, the benefit to these drivers that are trying to chase these dreams of being a race car driver, there's so much online education available to these kids. They can do motorsports and they can do their education at the same time. I asked him, in fact, about maybe going to college at some point. He said, well, I've got to deal with Mom, and she's got to sign off on what my plans are once I graduate from high school and go on to college.
You got another youngster in that black and white machine of Robert Noaker, who just looked to the inside and made a pass of Maxson. So he's struggling a bit here in the opening laps. We see the leaders getting away, all the battling. Looks like it's around the 9th or 10th position as they're going side by side. There is a look at Maxson. He's hung on the outside as look like Brian Lockwood looks to the inside, and he'll make a pass into turn number 8.
Luke Oxter was an early loser. He started row number 2. He's lost a couple of spots trying to keep pace with that lead pack now. Roland was a beneficiary. He was able to grab a spot on Gresham Wagner as well, and he continues along in P2. But again, while it's single file racing, still very, very competitive back in the field.
Yep, there's a look at Gresham Wagner, who right now holds down the 3rd position as Robert Stout, the veteran, all over the back bumper. He's going to take a look to the inside, shows him a fender. They'll go door to door through the carousel portion of the racetrack. Wagner takes a really wide line, and Mark, that's going to open the door for, it looks like, Drake Kemper, one of our winners from Austin, to slip around as well. So Gresham Wagner started on the front row as we see one car getting offline a little bit, but Wagner going backwards here in the early portions of this race.
Looked like the 49 of Peter Enzer took a wide swing off of that turn and got the right sides off of the dirt a little bit, kicked up a little dust as the field roars by now. They start to work their way through that Alabama roller coaster. And a pretty good battle between Kemper in the 99, Wagner in the 5, and Gonzalez in the 57.
Yeah, Gresham Wagner has had his hands full. Oh, I thought they might go 3 wide up the hill. Looks like they will down to the Charlotte's Web portion of the racetrack. They'll fan out. Wagner's going to get squeezed out of a couple more spots as Robert Noaker takes a spot at the outside as another driver slips by on the inside. Right now, though, Michael Carter is your leader by about a half a second. Looks like Celine Roland starting to run him down. Brian Ortiz runs in 3rd. Luke Oxner is 4th. And then Peter Enzer, strong charge, Mark, one of our rookie drivers. He started in the 9th position. And Mo, he has already moved his way into the 5th spot.
Yeah, as expected, MX-5, battery tender MX-5 Cup Racing, nose to tail all through the field. This is very exciting. You mentioned the two young kids, the two 14-year-olds, and we have a 15-year-old also. And when you watch them drive the car, particularly Noah Aker, you don't know watching the way that car is being driven, whether there's a 14-year-old or a 44-year-old in it. They're very, very mature when they get in these cars. There's two other drivers in the field who we often say the car doesn't know who's driving it, particularly the car doesn't know the gender of who's driving it. So in that ND1 class, we have two girls in the field. Sarah Montgomery, a veteran of the series, raced in the series for several years and took last year off. And she's back in the series now. She's running an ND1 car for 6 sideways. And the other young lady, who's in her first year in Mazda MX-5 Cup racing, has a very famous last name, Lonnie Unser.
Yeah, we'll be visiting with somebody that's also well known in that family here in a minute or two. As a matter of fact, he just slipped into the broadcast booth and joined us. Al Unser Jr., how about the next generation of Unsers coming up through Motorsports?
We're really proud of Lonnie. She's out there doing a great job. And I was in here watching the start of the race. That's the first time I've seen 3 abreast going through turn 5. I was going, wow, these Mazdas, man, they're great cars and they're great beginning cars, and that's why Lonnie is racing in these things, is because they're just super, as far as teaching you how to car feel and that sort of thing, and get in there and do door-to-door racing in a safe environment. They do a great job.
Well, if you follow Dad Johnny on social media, he's plenty proud of her for sure, and he has actually done a great job of posting her career as she's progressed through the ranks.
Absolutely. Johnny's very proud of Lonnie, and the whole family is really, and so she's out here, she's representing us good. That's her on the camera there in that red 92. She just does a great job.
Let's talk about the significance of the number 92 and why she chose to go with that number here in MX-5.
That number is actually my Uncle Bobby's number up at Pikes Peak. I think Johnny ran it up at Pikes Peak. It's a special number to the family, especially going up the Pikes Peak Hill Climb.
I don't know why they didn't rename that Unser Peak. You guys got mail at the top of that thing. You want it so often over there.
It's something the family was the family was discovered. Uncle Bobby and Dad were discovered up at Pikes Peak. It used to be a USAC points race for the Indy 500, and they did such a good job that the owners wanted the Unsers at Indy, and so that's what happened.
Al Unser Jr. is our guest in the booth here for the MX-5 Cup Series, and Mark James, Nick Yeoman, Mo Murray here as well. Talk about the development. How much has it changed from when you were coming up in motorsports, seeing all these development series, the Road to Indy and this one as well?
The Road to Indy is just fantastic. It didn't exist when I came up. I started in go-karts, and then my next step was actually a sprint car that I raced on the dirt. And you really can't compare the go-kart to the sprint car.
Right.
And so, and then I drove the Super V, which was kind of like the mini Indies of that day. But then there was a big gap between the power and the speed of a Super V to an Indy car. So my father wanted me to run the Can-Am series, and so that's what I did. So the Road to Indy didn't exist, and today it does, and it's such a great thing because it really stair-steps the young talent out there in a competitive and safe environment to get better and better.
And before long, I think a lot of these names that we've seen over the past couple of years we've been covering this series, we're going to see these drivers in the Rolex 24 Hours and
yes,
whatnot.
Yep. These are the future stars of IndyCar racing.
This is the Battery Tender Global MX-5 Cup presented by BF Goodrich Tires. So Michael Carter is your leader into turn number 1 over Celine Roland, Ryan Ortiz, and Luke Oxner. Top 4 getting away just a bit as Roland kind of takes a peek to the inside. As we mentioned, Al Unser Jr. joins us here in the broadcast booth. I hear from a lot of IndyCar drivers because with the partnership with IndyCar, we see the MX-5 series racing a lot of the same weekends, same racetracks. I know a lot of folks in the IndyCar paddock enjoy watching these races. Do you get that same thrill?
Absolutely. Just like when I watched the start of this race, I go, holy cow, those guys are out there. They're serious. They're getting it done, and they're doing it safely. I can't express how important that safe factor is, and with these young kids and going out there and door to door and driving these Mazdas, you just can't beat it. It's awesome.
See the field making their way down to the turn 8 and 9 hill, kind of on mark 4. 2 packs of 4 cars breaking away here in the early portions of this race. Still 33 minutes to go, but it's Carter, Roland, Ortiz, and Oxter that first 4. Then you've got Stout, Enzer, Kemper, and Gonzalez the second 4, and then Robert Noaker, that youngster, followed by, it looked like Gresham Wagner rounding out your top 10. Then you've got the 43 of Brian Lockwood and then orange car leading 3 more cars down the back straightaway.
Well, we talk about young drivers. How about the feat that your young driver pulled off a couple of weeks ago at Circuit of the Americas and Colton Hurd? That kid is as advertised.
He is super talented, absolutely. You know, Colton, and he's so calm in the car. You know, he goes out there and he doesn't get shook whatsoever. He goes out there and just flat is super quick and super smooth. As this, you know, he just turned 19 years old just this last week. But when he puts on that helmet, he is an experienced veteran, and he's proven it and showing it in the IndyCar series.
So before we let you go, how heavily involved will Johnny be in your niece's development moving forward? Or is he one of those dads that keeps an eye on things but allows her to make decisions and surround herself with other people?
Johnny is heavily involved, okay? But at the same time, you need to, and what he does, and he knows this, is to go at the speed of Lonnie. So when Lonnie's ready to graduate up, then that's when it'll happen. It won't happen until Lonnie's ready. So, yeah, he's heavily involved. He's a nervous wreck right now. I guarantee he's out there watching.
Well, you have a little experience. You know what it's like to watch one of your kids. And I've talked to drivers over the years, and a lot of them don't like it.
That's right. That's right. No matter how good you are, you know, we, especially us drivers, we know how much control we're in out there. And when you're driving them on the edge like this, you know, you're at the edge of control, and every now and then you jump over that edge, and you know. That's what makes a great driver, is they can go out there and do that and not crash. And so far, Lonnie has just done a super job at that.
Well, we know you guys are busy getting ready to go qualifying a little later on today. Thanks for joining us. We appreciate it.
Thanks for having us.
Yep, sure thing. I'll let you, Junior.
Well, working lap number 7 here in the Battery Tender Global MX-5 Cup, it is Michael Carter, who has led all 7 laps so far. He has certainly been challenged by Celine Roland, who has kind of hounded the back bumper of that Mazda. Further back, we see the 57 machine of Gonzalez take a look to the inside. Boy, he bounces his way through turn 2 as he kind of hangs Robert Stout to the outside. That's a good battle for the 6th position mark as they roar back up the hill out of turn number 4.
You can tell, Nick, the grip really starts to go away when they take the high line through that turn, and the driver to the inside clearly has the advantage. But Stout is certainly not letting him check out. But, you know, the longer that they slice and dice, the further away that Carter, Roland, Ortiz, and Oxter are going to be able to check out among those front 4. And you look at Carter, he's running a vastly different line, and because of that, he was able to gain himself a little bit of distance. That youngster so far, Nick, has not put a wheel wrong, as they say, and he's got some pretty good drivers in cars behind him. But that young man has handled Roland, Ortiz, and Oxter like a veteran.
Well, this is very similar to what we saw in Austin a couple weeks ago, where Michael Carter was up front for much of that race, and then towards the end of the race, you saw the veteran drivers kind of snooker him a little bit and hang him out to dry to score the race wins. It's all about learning for Michael Carter in his first year in MX-5. Doing a great job so far, though. Again, has led every single lap as that front 4 has gotten away. Then we take a peek back. This is that second group of 4 that Drake Kemper leads through the carousel right now. Front 4, you can see probably 20 to 25 car lengths, but it continues to stay stable. Last time at about 4.5 seconds was Kemper in 5th, up to Michael Carter, our race leader. This time across the line as Carter leads the 8th lap of the race. That gap will be right at 5.1 seconds. So as they continue to battle their mark down to
Tyler Gonzalez. Yeah, Tyler Gonzalez is going to get to the inside and force Kemper plenty wide, and now he'll do the crossover move, trying to get inside of him, and they make contact. One gets sideways, and Gonzalez is going to be the big beneficiary there. It looks like Kemper's going to be the loser.
That was a great job, though, by our one of our winners in Austin, Drake Kemper, simply to hold on to that MX-5 Mazda as he got super sideways. Mo, that was a tremendous save save as Drake Kemper's going to have to gather it back up to catch Stout and Gonzalez.
And it takes a couple of corners to gather that up. Drake has been in the series quite a while and certainly knows how to drive these cars. Drake is a former child actor. A lot of the teenagers would recognize his face from some of the shows that he was on. But let's talk about the car that Drake is driving right now. So we talked about the accessibility of this series. You buy a car, it's absolutely race ready. Sometimes you don't even buy a car. This car that Drake is driving, the number 99, he won in a raffle. There's a charity we support called Lemons of Love. They send care packages out to folks going through cancer treatments, chemotherapy, etc., cancer treatments. And they auction off an MX-5 Cup car every year. And 2 years ago, Drake Kemper won this car. It was originally what we would call an ND1 car. He bought the upgrade kit and upgraded it to ND2. He didn't race in the series last year. Came back this year with this. This is the raffle winning car, the car he won in the raffle. He won last time out at Coda, and he's certainly running at the front if Gonzalez doesn't beat him out of the way in this race here at Barber.
Battle for the lead as Celine Roland looks to the inside, and he'll take over the top spot from Michael Carter. So Mark Carter leads the first 9 laps, and on lap 10 into the first quarter, Roland decides to flex a little muscle.
You got the feeling that it was when, not if, because, I mean, he was right in the tire tracks, and early in the race, Carter was able to pull away, but who knows, maybe Carter took the mindset, well, let him lead a little bit, because sometimes the lead is not the place to be on the last couple of laps, as we saw at Circuit of the Americas. By the way, we do need to let you know that the highest running in one car is Nathaniel Sparks. He's running 15th. Just behind him is John Dean. He's running 16th. And then Hernan Palermo is running in the 18th position, so that is the battle for ND1.
Yeah, that's a good battle for that race lead in ND1, as Sparks had just a 1/10 of a second lead over John Dean. So we'll be keeping an eye on that battle for the race win in ND1. Up front, though, it is still Celine Roland who has taken over the top spot here in the Battery Tender Global MX-5. We take a look back at that battle for the 5th position. There's your leaders. Roland about a car length lead over Carter, and 2 or 3 car lengths over Brian Ortiz.
3rd member of our broadcast crew, 4th member actually, but nonetheless very, very important is our good friend Tony Laporte. And Tony, great race so far.
Yeah, absolutely, guys. Barber Motorsports Park always lends itself to fantastic on-track action as that lead pack comes out of corner 17 down the front straightaway. You know, you guys have been watching a lot of action involving Robert Stout, that number 28 for Macombi Mackler, as Michael Carter wants to try to make something happen on Celine Roland. He stays in line in corner number 1. But I had an interesting talk with Robert Stout's dad, Ken, who spots and does a lot of work on that Macombi Mackler car for Robert, and they talked about how that second fastest time that they got laid down in practice number 2 yesterday came on very worn out BF Goodrich tires. As Carter starts to take a fight to Celine Roland going down into corner number 5, we'll see who has the guts to break the latest. But Robert Stout really wants this race to kind of get into the tail end portion because he feels like he's really got something, but only on worn out tires. So keep an eye on Robert Stout as the battle up front here is starting to pick up even more intensely.
We talked a little bit about quote-unquote worn-out tires, and boy, I'll tell you what, I don't know what a set of those would look like from the good folks at Be a Good. And what's amazing about it is that, Cosmo, the tire compounds that they use, they don't do a lot of testing. They haven't changed these compounds a lot since the series was developed. That's how confident not only BF Goodrich is of the product, but the series is as well.
Well, you know, they don't. BF Goodrich builds fantastic tires. Their slick tires have always been great. The wet tire, if we ever get a chance to run, we have on occasion run them in their wet tires even, it's incredible. But it's an important point to make, that it's one of the variables that the drivers don't have to think about. This is a series where we want to limit the amount of variables, the amount of adjustments that the drivers have to deal with, because it's very easy in a complex race car for a driver to get lost. And we limit, as Chad McCumbee told us, there's certain boxes that where adjustments are available, and we want the drivers to focus on those areas because they lend themselves best to a driver developing their understanding of vehicle dynamics and their understanding of how the car needs to work when it's on the racetrack. The tire isn't one of those areas. Everybody's on the same tire, and thankfully for us, our partners at BF Goodrich Tires have done a fantastic job. They've been involved in the series from day one. They do a fantastic job bringing a very good and very raceable tire to this series.
So Celine Roland continues to lead. He has taken the lead away from Michael Carter. Did that about a lap and a half ago. Ortiz, Carter, Oxner, in fact, the top four. Kemper, Stout, Gonzalez, and Enzer have some work to do, Nick, to try to keep pace.
Yeah, that lead is stretched out to a full 6 seconds for Roland over fifth place running Drake Kemper. And then we see that battle for about the 6th and 7th position continue to rage down the hill, turns to 8 and 9 as Gonzalez had to give up a couple spots after the contact. Now he's starting to move his way back up. There's the battle for third as Luke Oxner puts the right side tires up on the curbing. That car got a little sideways, and it's going to allow Michael Carter to hold off as the front two starting to get away from these drivers in third and fourth.
Yeah, Carter bumped it up over the curbing. He did a little slide job in the exit of that turn as well, and he is flat holding on for dear life as he is under assault from Luke Oxner. Oxner right there at the tire tracks, but he will bump up about a half a groove higher, but Carter's able to hold him off for now. This is the battle for the third position, the 08 and the 77 as they make their way down the straightaway. We'll see if Oxner gets a little bit of a draft, and meanwhile, back up front, Celine Roland starts to stretch it out to about a 4-car length advantage.
Yep, and we see the battle for fifth now as Gonzalez has got a really, really good car, good setup on that MX-5. He slips to the inside of Drake Kemper and takes over the 5th position. So a big shout out to that young man, Tyler Gonzalez, started 13th today, and Mark has raced his way up to 5th. This second group of cars we're watching on still have a lot of work to be done. 6.2 seconds the advantage for our race leaders as Kemper going to give Gonzalez a good shove down the hill towards turn 6.
Yep, gives him a good shove, but it looks like there's not going to be a change in that position just yet now as they work their way off of turn number 6. A little short straightaway before it bends back to the right. And again, yesterday, we watched it on the video board. I think they're coming up on, to me, other than straightaways, of course, one of the fastest portions of the racetrack when they exit turn number 7.
Yeah, there's a lot of nice straightaways here at Barber Motorsports Park where you can really open up these MX-5 engines and let these cars hum. And this is one of them. We see these drivers. It's not a straightaway. We call it the back straightaway. There's a lot of S-ing to do back and forth. But, Mark, these drivers carry a lot of speed to this portion of the racetrack and certainly use up every inch left and the right, using up the curbing. But right now, Gonzalez doing a really nice job holding Kemper and the veteran Robert Stout at bay.
Well,
so we just talked about tires a moment ago, and our good friend Peter Calhoun from BF Goodrich Tires just texted me to remind me that the tires that these cars are using in this series, and in particular here, are made just down the road in Tuscaloosa, Alabama.
Oh, yeah.
And there are many of the good folks from BF Goodrich Tires who build those tires are here on site this weekend, and we welcome you, and we think we're very happy that you're part of this series.
Tony Laporte, I spent some time back in the paddock prior to this race, and of course you spend a lot of time back there throughout the course of the season, of course, with these drivers and these race teams. And I think the thing that it continues to impress me about this series is the camaraderie. I mean, it's healthy, friendly, intense competition, all of that at the same time. And when they're back in the paddock, we saw it in Kona when we had a couple of cars heavily damaged, and we wondered if guys were going to be able to answer the bell. Teams support teams, and they support one another throughout this series.
Yeah, absolutely, Mark. I mean, the Global MX-5 Cup presented by BF Goodrich is unlike any series I've had the fortune to work with or call. They are a great group of drivers and teams because it's families that are building these teams and putting these cars out on track together. You talked about in Austin, Texas, when Robert Noaker was involved in that big incident on the opening lap of the first race of the season. Crew guys came off the wall as Robert walked down the pit lane back to his pit spot to shake his hand, pat him on the back, and make sure he's doing okay. And I think Mo can comment on it at even greater length, but it probably has a lot to do with the fact that Mazda is so greatly involved in grassroots motorsports all around the U.S. So when you go to a higher level of competition like the one here at IndyCar sanctioned events, the Global MX-5 Cup drivers, it's still grassroots racers just doing it on a much larger platform.
Thank you, Tony, and that's true. If you add up the number of race entries, as we watch a replay from young Tyler Gonzalez, 14 years old, he gets a little bit. It's ironic that we would call that the chrome horn from the chrome-colored car that Greg Kemper's driving, and he gets a little friendly wave too. from Drake.
You call that a wave, huh? That's one way to call it.
He's just telling him he's number one.
That's right, the one finger salute.
Yeah. So back to grassroots racing. The two guys running at the front are both recipients for this year and last year of Mazda's Grassroots Racing Scholarship Award that gets them into this series. If you add up all the entries in SEC racing over the course of the year, the number is about 18,000, I forget the exact number. 55% of those entries are cars that are Mazdas, or Mazda entered race cars. There's an absolutely dominant position for Mazda in grassroots racing, and that allows us to really have a foundation on which to build these series like Mx-5 Cup and build a ladder up to our prototype program in the IMSA WeatherTech series. Each year we gather the best of those young drivers and pull them together for a shootout. They spend a couple of days. They have to produce a video, a YouTube video online. They spend a couple of days at the racetrack in the company of some very, very accomplished coaches and judges. And from that experience, we choose a winner. We choose the driver who will best represent themselves and Mazda moving forward. Celine Roland won that scholarship a year ago and parlayed that into Rookie of the Year honors, a couple of race wins and Rookie of the Year honors in last year's series. The Rookie of the Year honor carried a $75,000 prize. And Michael Carter is the most recent winner of the shootout, who's now running in third place. Michael won our $200,000 scholarship, with which he was able to then go shopping among the teams here in the paddock. We met some of the bigger teams earlier today, and put a deal together that gets him a full season in battery tender Mx-5 Cup racing.
We talked to Chad McCubbey earlier, Nick, and one of the things we talked about with him in terms of a driver development program, he says, I don't necessarily want the fastest guy. He said, we can make a guy fast in this series. We just want a guy that's good. But he said, what I want to see is when the crew gets to the shop in the morning, I want to see a driver that's one of the first ones there, maybe helping the guys lift the door up, that's not afraid to help the guys work on the car, clean it up, whatever the case may be. He said, got him to have somebody that's a total buy-in from top to bottom, and that's what we look for, because, again, they don't have to be fast out of the gate. We can make them fast.
And we take a look at the Indy race 1 leader right now, John Dean, thoroughly has that top spot locked down in ND1 by a good, look like 2 or 3 seconds over Nathaniel Sparks. But to your point, Mark, in terms of driver development, you're right. Natural gifts is one thing, but you want to see a hard worker. I also think a lot of these team owners in any level of motorsports, they want to see drivers that give good feedback to race engineers and can adapt, because as you know, every race car, whether it's in a Mazda or in a different type of race car, they're all different. They all drive differently. They all take different skill sets. And the drivers that can adapt and give good feedback to race engineers to tune up those setups, I think a lot of times that's even more valuable than just natural gifted skills.
Well, to that point, we talked to one of our 14-year-old up-and-comers, and we were talking about the difference in the setup between a circuit of the Americas and Barber. I said, okay, explain to me, what's different about the setup? What changes did they make? He said, to be honest with you, I don't have any idea. I let them do that. I just get in and drive it.
And that brings up a great point about teams, because many of these teams are built around experienced racers, whether they're still in the car like John Dean, or they've stepped out of this kind of car like a Chad McCumbee or a Stephen McAleer. They're experienced racers who can then take these young, raw talents and help them develop their skills and help them develop the car around what they're doing. That's why the situation Lonnie is in is so interesting, because she has Johnny, who's a very accomplished driver in his own right, as her dad, and people like Al Jr., who joined us in the booth to lean into and help her develop. One note about the ND1 class, you mentioned John Dean is at the front of that class and his teammate Sparky is in second. Erna Palermo is third, but Sarah Montgomery is fourth, one of our 2 girls. Lonnie's running 6th in ND1 at the moment. If Sarah makes the podium in ND1, she will become the first, if either of the girls make the podium, she will become the first female driver to ever stand on a battery tender Mx-5 Cup podium. And we are absolutely looking forward to that happening this year, and I'm very confident that at some point this year, one or both of them will stand on a podium.
Well, and Tony, the border, we made this observation. We know the scholarships that at stake, the difference between ND1 and ND2, but you have firsthand experience after having been in victory lane both days at Circuit of the Americas. Make no mistake about it, the battle for that championship in Indy 1 is every bit as heated as the championship battle in Indy 2.
Well, exactly, Mark, and people are sometimes quick to forget that the Indy 1, yes, it may be the older generation car, and at certain tracks like Austin, Texas, can be anywhere from 2 to 2.5 seconds slower than the more recently updated Indy 2 MX-5 Cup cars. But as you guys up there were all just talking about, you've got Mr. MX-5, John Dean, and one of his driver's teammates, Nathaniel Sparks. Both of them are race winners and champions in the series. They're competing in that Indy 1 category. There are no slouches in either one, Indy 1 or Indy 2. Both series have drivers that have competed for championships and have won championships. So the Indy 1 victory lane is just as exciting, and the battles are just as intense as you're going to see in Indy 2.
And Tony has the privilege of handling both of those victory lanes when we get to our post-race. And issue for the 43 of Brian Lockwood on the course, Nick.
Yeah, we just saw that orange MX-5 pull to the outside of the racetrack, thoroughly out of the racing line, off track. Not exactly sure what could have went wrong, but his day comes to an end early on. And we see our leader, Celine Roland, approaching turns 8. Mark, now all of a sudden, they've got a little lap traffic to work with. A pair of lap cars there are going to have to hold off that front 4 pack that really just is kind of accordion back up. Those front 4 all separated by just a couple car lengths.
Yeah, he's not as comfortable as he once was, for sure, knowing that traffic looms in front of him. And while we have only had 2 race leaders and 1 lead change, still very competitive, Nick. We've had 137 passes field wide.
Yep, Celine Roland has really, after he took over the lead on lap 10, has not surrendered it back to Michael Carter or Brian Ortiz as he tries to work his way through lap traffic. Lap car moves to the outside and heeds to our race leader, does a nice job. So Celine Roland looks like he'll lead another lap with just 12 minutes to go. Roland is your leader in ND2. John Dean, your race leader in ND1.
Good on that lap traffic, Nick, for not wanting to play a role. Caught him in a very tough area around that 14, 15, 16. Those sweeping turns, and that could have been a factor, but that car gets to the high side and lets the guys up front race for the win.
Yeah, that's the neat thing about this racetrack here at Barber Motorsports Park is there aren't a lot of places around the racetrack where you can, set up guys and get out of the way. There's a lot of high commitment, high speed corners here at Barber, Mark, that these drivers really have to be on edge and push these race cars to turn fast laps and run up front. But if you're a lap car, as you mentioned, there's not a lot of spots that you can just easily get out of the way.
Kemper Gonzalez setting up for turn number 6. That's the 99 and the 57. This is the battle for 5th. Kemper's able to get off that turn just a little bit quicker. Robert Stout having some trouble keeping pace with that battle, Nick, but certainly Kemper and Gonzalez putting on a pretty good show in that battle for 5th.
Yeah, but those two have leaned on each other a little bit throughout the course of this race. This is the battle for the final spot in the top 5 here at Barber Motorsports Park. Drake Kemper obviously has championship expectations on his mind after that win at Austin. He comes in as your points leader, doing a good job holding on to that final spot in the top 5. But boy, look at rookie, the youngster Tyler Gonzalez move all over the racetrack as they snake their way through the S's. He really wants that top spot. Kemper, though, a little bit smoother down the back straightaway as he'll gap him by a couple car lengths.
Fairly unique set of circumstances. Typically we run one on Saturday and one on Sunday. This is a doubleheader day, though, as we will race number 2 a little bit later on today.
Not only that, but we also qualified this morning. So yes, a very full day for all of these drivers and all of these teams. If anyone has a problem in this race, you have a very short turnaround time to get a car ready for race 2. We saw in COTA when Robert Neuiker had that big hit on the first lap of race 1. At least he had an overnight break to find a different car in that case. But here, a big hit or something that's a lot of damage to a car would be very difficult to recover from in time for the second racing lap. You mentioned Tyler Gonzalez racing here with Drake Kemper. We call him a rookie. He's 14 years old. He's a rookie at everything in life, really, but we call him a rookie. But he's been racing karts for the last 7 years. And one thing that's very interesting about the two Tylers, the two 14-year-olds in the race, they've raced against each other and they've raced as teammates in karting since that time for the last 7 years. So yes, they're new to Battery Tender MX-5 Cup Series, but they've been around each other. They've raced each other a lot, and they've been around racing karting, which is really the one of the best places for young kids to learn how to be race car drivers. They've been doing that for several years.
Tony Laporta, there's an outside chance that Mother Nature could intervene by the time we get to race number 2. And as we look out over the far end of the racetrack down around 13, 14, clouds starting to thicken a little bit, sky starting to darken, even noticeable changes in the conditions.
Yeah, it's definitely cooled off, probably dropped at least 5 degrees since the start of this race, Mark. It started the day at about 74 degrees when we rolled out and the clock began under that yellow flag condition after the delay. We've been watching the radar here at the timing stand down at the start-finish line on pit lane. When I got down here, the radar screen showed clear all the way around the Birmingham area. Of course, race number 2 on the day isn't for a couple more hours, so of course the weather could change at any time. But I do want to just throw in a note. Mo was talking about Tyler Maxson and Tyler Gonzalez, the 2 young Carters. I caught up with Tyler Maxson as we did some Instagram live content on the false grid before we rolled out onto the track for race number 3 of the season, the one we're watching right now. And I talked to Tyler Maxson. I said, what did you learn from sprint karting? You know, those are short races, high intensity, very similar to what we're doing here in the Battery Tender Global MX-5 Cup. Were you able to transfer anything from your days and your years in sprint karting? He said, absolutely. He said, you really have to do these races just like a sprint kart race where it's full attack, it's full go. You really can't let up, and that is very mentally waning. He talked about always having to be on the trigger and ready to make a move at any time. So, yeah, Mo, absolutely. Coming from karting for years, whether it was the Florida Winter Tour or the SCUSA Super Nationals, Tyler Max and Tyler Gonzalez were teammates on the Bennett chassis for a very long time as they were going up to the cadet ranks in sprint karting. But it was the perfect training ground for this kind of racing. Full send, full go, all the time.
About 7 minutes to go in this session, and Tony, on a lighter note, you kept the drivers on their toes during the track walk. I had an opportunity to watch that on social media the other day. They had a good time, but let's talk about how beneficial that track walk was for these drivers.
Well, absolutely. I mean, and when you come to a track like Barber Motorsports Park, I found it beneficial to do the track walk because I don't think people watching at home right now on MazdaMotorsport.com or when they take in the IndyCar race, when you see this venue, however you take it in, you don't really realize the elevation change, and you certainly don't realize how narrow this track is. And when you have drivers like Lonnie Unser, for example, who's making her first competitive start here at Barber Motorsports Park, that track walk, she got so much information joining her team from Six Sideways Racing, guys like John Dean and Nathaniel Slick. So that track walk was extremely beneficial. And to go back to a point you guys were discussing earlier with Alan Jr., talking about the IndyCar drivers who take in the live coverage of these MX-5 Cup races. I don't know how much of that video you saw, Mark, but we caught up with Will Power and the Team Penske guys, and we asked him, we said, do you take in the MX-5 Cup races? He says, heck yeah, I do.
Yep.
Stephen McAleer's my favorite guy. So there you go right there. The IndyCar drivers, when they're not on track, they're enjoying the on-track competition that you see in MX-5 Cup racing.
Well, and I can tell you, Nick, that our driver analyst, Anders Krohn, ran in the 5K last night, and he was the first one to admit, you know what, that elevation change on that back straightaway is a little more pronounced when you're running it than it looks to the naked eye. So.
Yeah, there's a lot of elevation change here at Barber Motorsports Park. It's just unique is the word that I keep coming back to describe this racetrack. Whether it be the structures of the spiders and the wildlife, the fabulous flowers and trees that you see all over this place, and then on the racetrack itself with the elevation changes, the challenging corners, it has a lot of characteristics to it that I think makes for just some great racing. Had a good race here in Battery Tender Global MX-5 Cup. Getting down to the nitty-gritty here, Mark. 5.5 minutes to go. That front four remains unchallenged. It's Roland, Ortiz, Carter, and then Luke Oxner in that 77 machine as Tony Laporta. Oxner trying to hang on to those front three here in the final minutes.
Yeah, he's doing a really good job at hanging on to the front three. Nick, probably a joke he wouldn't want to hear is he didn't do a very good job hanging on to the car at the end of practice number 2 yesterday when he slid off the track coming out of corner number 5. Talk about that elevation change Mark was just noting on. He went up and he crested the exit of turn number 5 here as you guys have a great view of it. The car got away from him. The right side BF Goodrich just slipped off into the grass. He tried to save the car, wasn't able to. The car rotated around on him, slid backwards, and as Mo and I actually called that practice session, we saw Luke do his best but not be able to succeed in keeping that number 77 car from making contact with the barriers off to what would be driver's right, but the way he hit it, it was driver's left. He came down pit lane. We saw some wrinkled bodywork. Thought, hey, it's a light hit, can't be that bad. Well, ultimately, they had to take the 77 behind the wall. Talked to him later. They actually broke the steering rack in that number 77, so they had to pull the front end apart, do some pretty serious work on it. And to see him come back, run top 5 in qualifying, and he was up there battling when this group was a little bit tighter packed together, but right now he's holding station comfortably in the 4th position, trying to find his way into a podium spot after suffering some mechanical issues during an off-track incident yesterday in practice number 2.
Yeah, so a tip of the cap to those guys from White Racing for putting that car together after the issues to get Luke Oxner competitive, and he's done a great job driving the wheels off that car. Looks like he's at worst going to come away with a top 4 finish, but boy, I know all their focus is trying to get that car on the podium. Here's that battle for 5th that we've been watching. The youngster Tyler Gonzalez has just done a fantastic job, Mark, of holding off Drake Kempner lap after lap, corner after corner around Barber Motorsports Park. Pretty impressive for that young man. And there's the battle for the lead. 3.5 minutes to go for Celine Roland.
Yep, Celine Roland trying to hold on and get to victory lane here at Barber Motorsports Park. Brian Ortiz in that 4 trying to keep pace with it. It's about a half a car length now as they work their way through turns 2 and 3. And I think Ortiz knows that the sand's running out of the proverbial hourglass as they come up out of turn number 4. Ortiz gets a run, but Roland's able to pull away a little bit. Roland is going to get to turn 5 first. Ortiz is going to stay right in the tire tracks. Both cars pretty stuck to the bottom of the racetrack. The wide swing, they'll scoot across the curbing and then hit that short little straightaway before they come into the view of the museum here very, very shortly. But those front 2 trying to check out a little bit on Carter and Oxner, who are running in 3rd and 4th.
Roland, your leader in ND2. John Dean has a 6-second lead over Nathaniel Sparks in ND1. So Dean looks like he is well on his way to another win in ND1. But the battle for the race lead in ND2 sees Celine Roland trying to hold off one of the veterans, Brian Ortiz. Seems like for the last handful of years, Mark, Ortiz is just always in the picture, running in the top 5 in the final minutes, going for race wins. That driver from Puerto Rico, a real good shoe. There is John Dean, our ND1 race winner. Like I said, about a 6-second lead over Nathaniel Sparks. What a start to the season for Dean, Mark, as he's about to go 3 for 3.
Yeah, he is trying to make a mockery of that ND1 class for sure. We talked about what is at stake. As a matter of fact, even though he is running for the win in ND1, he's actually keeping Alex Batchelor honest too, because he is in the 14th position. That's the 33 car just in front of him.
Yep, but of course they've got their own championship to run for, and John Dean, a veteran of this series, knows how to get it done. And he has had a tremendous day here at Barber Motorsports Park as he is poised to grab that race win in ND1. Getting down to it, minute and a half to go here at Barber Motorsports Park. There's Nathaniel Sparks as he's giving chase to John Dean. But Mo, this is pretty impressive. Barber Motorsports Park putting on a good race as we see those leaders make their way down to turn 5 and 6.
You know, I talked to Celine Roland this week. If you add up the combined winning margin from all 12 races last year, it was less than 5 seconds. And in one race in COTA 2 weeks ago, Celine won by about 5 seconds and blew that stat. So I talked to him about it. I said, hey, you're ruining my stats. And he said, don't worry, it's going to get better. Because he said the average is going to keep coming down and down, down. I'm quite sure that he's not racing to make my stats look good. He's doing everything he can right now to stay in front of Brian Ortiz. Brian has been running at the front of this series for a couple of years and is long overdue for a win. Brian's a very, very good guy, very good driver. Comes from Puerto Rico for each of these races. And is sponsored or supported in his racing by Bea Motorsports from Puerto Rico, the Mazda distributor over there. And these two, along with Michael Carter and Luke Oxner, are putting on a more of a typical battery tender MX-5 Cup race because there's really very little between all 4 of these drivers. 2,500 passes basically last year throughout the course of the season, and here we are looking at 404 passes, even though we've only had one exchange. The white flag is out now as they cross the start-finish line, and Roland, Ortiz, Carter, they've started to pull away from Oxford a little bit into turn number 1.
Yep, no doubt it's going to be decided by these 4. Roland swings a little wide. He left the door open for Ortiz, who stuck his nose there. Didn't have a good enough run, though, as it looked like Roland really closed the door as they creep back up the hill. Roland will catch and grab that lead by about a car length length as Ortiz going down to the bottom of the hill, Mark, one of the best passing spots on this racetrack.
And Carter looking for some room. He's not going to be able to find it. Roland to the bottom of the racetrack. Ortiz to the bottom of the racetrack. That familiar wide swing. Ortiz goes just a little bit wider now as they start to set up for turn number 7. Again, this is a fast portion of the racetrack. We have seen some passes through here now. They'll bend their way through turn number 7, start to set up for 8 and 9. They bump the curbing with the left side, and so far, Roland is not blinking. Both get wide, both wiggle just a little bit, allowing third place Carter to pull up. So, will second and third, Ortiz and Carter, be able to get together and slingshot past Ortiz down that back straightaway? That remains to be seen. Celine Roland, holding off all comers now, has a lead of about a half a car length as they head toward the final few turns here at Barber Motorsports Park.
And it seems like every time Brian Ortiz gets close, Roland is able to stretch that lead out just a little bit. They make their way through the carousel of turns 16 and 17. One final left-hander for Celine Roland. He's been perfect all day long. Out of the final corner, he's got the lead by Brian Ortiz by a couple car lengths. He'll swing the driver's left and see the twin checkered flag as Celine Roland scores the win in ND2. Here's the battle for fifth. Marcus Gonzalez is going to try to hold off Drake Kemper.
And it looks like he's going to be able to do that. Kemper will make a last charge to the finish line, but the 57 is going to get there first. So a great piece of driving by Gonzalez.
And here comes John Dean through turns 16 and 17. He will streak out of the final corner and see the checkered flag as John Dean scores the race win in ND1. Here at Barber Motorsports Park, it is Celine Roland and John Dean, your big winners here at Barber.
Sparks and Palermo grab the second and third spots on the podium in ND1. So there's no question John Dean has been a little stingy with ND1 races so far this year.
Yep, a tremendous performance as he really went unchallenged in that ND1 class. Held off Nathaniel Sparks by 6.5 seconds. The lead for Roland over Ortiz was just a third of a second. So it's Celine Roland and John Dean, your big winners in the Battery Tender Global MX-5 Cup here at Barber Motorsports Park. We have completed the third race of the 2019 Battery Tender Global MX-5 Championship presented by BF Goodrich Tires. And Mark James, Celine Roland does a tremendous job holding off Brian Ortiz, Michael Carter, Luke Oxner, those front four. They get away from everyone, and Roland just too strong in that final lap. He'll score his second win of this season.
Yeah, I mean, he's a veteran, and I don't think there's any question. He came into the season with a jaw squarely locked. I mean, I think the expectation level was very high for him last year, and no one more disappointed than him in not winning that championship.
That's true. Celine came in as a rookie last year, the scholarship winner. He was a very popular scholarship winner, and by that I mean lots of his competitors in grassroots racing rated him and said, yes, he's the guy, as they did with Michael Carter this year. And so Celine came in, he got a race win on his very first weekend at COTA, and then he understood, or he found out that maybe this series isn't as easy as everybody makes it out to be, and it took till the end of the season for him to get another race win, but he did get a second one, and you're right. I think he came into this year, his sophomore year in the series, saying, okay, last year, rookie year, didn't get the championship. This year, it's my year. I need to win this championship. And I think that's very much at the front of his mind.
Well, there's no question that he ran a very, very, very patient race and bided his time until he was able to work his way around Carter and get to victory lane. Tony?
2 weeks, 2 different states, and 2 back-to-back wins. Celine Roland, you get it done here at Barber Motorsports Park in Birmingham, Alabama. Was it easy or was it fun?
It was like a nightmare, honestly. Seeing Brian in my mirror, that was just honestly one of the scariest things. He's one of the best drivers in the Global MX-5 Cup, so it was intense, and I'm glad to bring home the win.
Only a few hours till race number 2 of the day, round 4 of the championship season. Are you going to do any work to the car? Do you need to?
We'll adjust some things, but I need a rest because I'm mentally exhausted.
All right, well, Celine Roland, go get a nap. We're back racing in just a few hours. Congratulations.
Thank you.
All right, that's back-to-back wins here in the 2019 season for Celine Roland in the 87.
Yep, 5:30 to be exact. The green flag for race number 2 here in the Battery Tender Global MX-5 Cup. Again, quick look at the top 5. It's Celine Roland who picks up the race win here at Barber Motorsports Park. Brian Ortiz second, Michael Carter third, Luke Oxner fourth, Tyler Gonzalez fifth, and then of course John Dean, the race winner in ND1. A great job by Tony Laporta trackside interviewing our race winner from O'Murray and Mark Janes. I'm Nick Yeoman. Thanks to Al Unser Jr. as well for joining us for the broadcast. We'll talk to you a little bit later from Barber Motorsports Park as Celine Roland and John Dean are your big winners in the Battery Tender Global MX-5 Cup presented by BF Goodrich Tires.
It's on for the lead. James Hinchcliffe goes. Joseph Newgarden wins. Dominant performance, Rossi. We witnessed something that hasn't been done in more than half a century. Scott Dixon is a 5-time